What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So this is the 2023 Moto G Stylus. But if you glanced at the spec sheet for this phone, you wouldn't think that. You'd probably think this phone was from 2021 because every single thing about it is worse than last year's Moto G Stylus. And that's not a hyperbole or exaggeration. I'm not making some over-the-top joke or trying to air out some minor grievances I have. I mean literally every spec, feature, and physical component that makes up this phone, inside and out, is measurably and provably worse than its predecessor. And look, at this point, if you know me, you know I'm very critical of Motorola's US smartphones, but this is a new low even for them. They made the phone smaller, they used a lower resolution display, a slower processor with less RAM, gave us less storage, took away the ultra-wide lens, downgraded the selfie camera of all things, and yet still want you to fork over $200 for it, which shockingly is the only thing about it that makes sense, since that's $80 to $100 cheaper than last year. But it should be cheaper. It's a worse phone. Now, I also want to be clear that we're talking specifically about the regular 2023 Moto G Stylus, the non-5G phone. It should be pretty obvious as to which one you're looking at when you're shopping around, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So size-wise, Motorola shrunk this G Stylus down quite a bit. It's now a 6.5-inch smartphone versus the massive 6.8-inch behemoth we had last year. Sure, it may be slightly easier to manage with one-handed use, but this is a stylus smartphone that for multiple years in a row was the biggest device available, and I think making it smaller is the wrong move. It's not like they shrunk the bezels at all. You still have a thick bottom chin and a poor screen-to-body ratio, so it sort of just feels like Motorola picked from the part bin when they put this phone together and used an old small display from a previous device. The rear cover did get redesigned, sort of, to be consistent with the rest of the G lineup. They kept this shiny pink, which I do like, and modernized the camera module, but they took away an important camera lens, and it's still all plastic all around with what Motorola calls a water repellent design, which probably is not good enough if you accidentally go swimming with it. On the left side, you'll notice Motorola did keep the microSD card slot for expandable storage, which would be cool if it weren't for the fact that it's like almost necessary to have an SD card in this phone because you only get 64 gigabytes of onboard storage. Half as much storage as last year, and barely enough to install a dozen of your favorite apps and snap some pictures. Like 25 gigs is already used up by Android and other essential system files, and there's a handful of pre-installed junk on this phone out of the box, like the Publishers Clearinghouse app and some puzzle game called WoW, and those awful app folders that present you with even more junk to install. I mean, as soon as you set this phone up, you feel like you made a mistake in buying it. It's really unfortunate. I feel like I'm getting all worked up already. I have a lot more to say about this phone, but I need to take a quick break to cool off thanks to channel sponsor Ranvu and their Ice 3 portable neck fan. The Ice 3 is an automated AI-powered cooling and heating wearable with additional health and wellness capabilities. It has 4 Ice Max engines with 7 upward and downward air ducts that blow a constant stream of cool air all around you. There's also 4 cooling semiconductors on the sides that get cold to the touch on your skin. And if you're in a cold environment, the Ice 3 actually does the opposite. You get a stream of warm air paired with a heated neckband. The Ice 3 has a full-color touchscreen built in for controlling everything. It also tracks other health metrics like your heart rate, steps, and blood oxygen level. It's super smart, and it pairs with the MetAura app on iOS and Android, where you have full control over the cooling and heating modes and quick access to your health and wellness info. And one more thing, the Ice 3 is AI powered, so if it senses that you're warm or that it's a bit cold out, it can automatically start cooling you down or warming you up. It takes into account the ambient temperature and various body measurements to give you exactly what you need. Ranvu's Ice 3 is once again available for 20% off, and there's an additional coupon you can apply as well. The Ice 3 has been keeping me cool, and thanks so much to Ranvu for sponsoring the channel this summer. Now, I already mentioned that the display on this phone is smaller, but you also get a worse viewing experience because the resolution is lower as well. Motorola bumped this phone back down to a 1600 by 720 resolution, 270 pixel per inch display with the same IPS LCD 90 Hz panel. It's not any brighter, it's not any more colorful, it's not any better in any other way whatsoever compared to last year. It's only worse. I think what Motorola figured was that if they made the display smaller, a lower resolution wouldn't be so bad. But at 6.5 inches, it's still a pretty big phone. And at that size, you can absolutely see every single pixel on the display. Nothing looks sharp. Text even looks kind of blurry. Your home screen wallpaper doesn't even look good. And the rest of the viewing experience is quintessential Motorola. The display doesn't get very bright, so there's a ton of glare. They used cheap, no-name glass. It's still an LCD display. And yeah, the 90 Hz option is nice, I guess. It makes the phone feel a little faster sometimes, but the phone itself is so slow that that doesn't even matter. We'll get into that in a second, but this downgraded display is something that really irks me. There's nothing more important on a smartphone than the screen. It's what you look at 100% of the time, and Motorola decided that making the display worse was okay. It's absolutely not. So what about performance and actually just using the phone? Well, Motorola took multiple steps backwards here. I already mentioned you get half as much storage, but you also get 4 GB of RAM instead of 6, and the processor in this phone is the MediaTek Helio G85, which came out in the spring of 2020. Last year's G Stylus had the Helio G88, which was newer and more powerful. So again, I say this phone just feels like a parts bin special. Like Motorola had a pile of these older, crappier components lying around from 2 or 3 years ago that they didn't use and just decided to toss them into this phone. For what reason, I still don't know. Using this phone is quite frustrating. Things don't load as quickly as they should. It becomes unresponsive at times. It's not fluid. The animations and scrolls are choppy, even with the supposed 90 Hz display option enabled. The only thing this phone has going for it is that it's running Android 13. That's an accomplishment for Motorola. Some of their phones are actually still stuck on Android 12, if you can believe that. And the most frustrating thing about all these performance downgrades is that Motorola still touts this phone as a powerful, precise, creator-focused or work-focused smartphone with its built-in stylus and the apps and add-ons that go along with it. But if you're struggling to do basic things and the phone is slower than molasses, what good is the stylus anyway? Motorola hasn't upgraded or otherwise altered the stylus experience either, which isn't a surprise. You can still use the stylus like you would your finger if you want. There's the same half a dozen Moto stylus apps there always has been, and the option to add your own stylus or non-stylus apps to the sidebar shortcut panel if you want. The stylus itself is also still just a metal stick thing. It's not smart, it's not connected to the phone. The stylus experience was always okay on these Moto devices, but when you make the user experience worse, when you make the phone slower, you also make the stylus experience worse. And with worse specs and a worse performing phone overall, I don't see how having the stylus now is at all beneficial. Now, to be fair, there is something Motorola has improved: their perceived sustainability efforts. Between the soy ink and recycled cardboard, they really want you to know that they care about the environment. Yet they created a more ridiculous cardboard insert to hide the fact that you don't get a charger in the box with this phone, just an older, slower USB-A cable, which is a waste in and of itself. And if we're being honest, the phone is practically e-waste. So I don't even know who Motorola is fooling. Sure, they recycled old parts to build this phone and saved a tree, I guess, with the box, but they probably did infinitely more damage manufacturing the phone in the first place. And let me just quickly finish off here by mentioning that rather than improving the camera setup on this phone like you would expect from any other new device, cameras are like the only thing these smartphone companies seem to care about right now, Motorola took the opposite approach and actually removed 2 of the useful camera lenses. They added back a dumb one and kept the main lens the same, and then downgraded the selfie camera. This phone has a 50 megapixel main lens and a 2 megapixel macro lens for up-close shots. It loses the ultra-wide lens, it loses the depth sensor, and the selfie camera goes from a 16 megapixel lens to an 8 megapixel one. I'm not going to waste any more time reiterating the same thing over and over again, but just know that pictures and videos are also worse than last year because, well, of course they are. There's a worse camera setup and a worse processor handling the images, so that should be pretty obvious. So the $64,000 question now is, why would Motorola even release this phone? It seems to not make any sense to bring to market a worse product, especially when you have fans with previous Moto G Stylus smartphones who may be eager to upgrade. I personally believe that Motorola did just want to use up some old parts they had in inventory. That's probably one of the reasons. Another reason is, yes, this phone is cheaper than last year price-wise, so perhaps they're thinking they could acquire new customers looking for a more affordable device. I just don't know what came first, their idea to use old components or their idea to have a cheaper phone. If it's the latter, they could have just made a better, different, cheap device. The other reason this phone exists, I think, is to actually just entice people to get the Moto G Stylus 5G instead. That phone honestly is pretty good. It's an upgrade from the previous year, but it's also twice as expensive, $400. So I'm not sure many people would be motivated to spend so much more, but I guess that's up to Motorola to find out. For now, I would absolutely not recommend anyone buy the 2023 Moto G Stylus because, well, it's just a bad smartphone. There are better options out there for similar and even less money. Your current phone is probably better than this one anyway, and I really want Motorola to learn a lesson in launching phones like this. We should all vote with our wallets and tell Motorola that a phone like this is just not okay. They can and should do better. But what do you guys think? Am I missing something? Maybe I'm being too harsh. Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts for sure. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.